If you're lying awake at 3 a.m. replaying a conversation from 6 years ago, you're not spiraling. You're running a mental simulation your brain refuses to close. Psychologists call this the prediction error loop, where your mind is desperately trying to rewrite history because it hates the gap between what happened and what you needed to happen. Here's the twist. Approximately 20% of people have nervous systems wired in permanent 8K IMAX mode, meaning your brain records everything in excruciating detail and saves it for later processing, which usually happens the second your head hits the pillow. Neuroscience confirms this isn't anxiety. It's your default mode network lighting up like a board meeting, replaying scenarios to extract patterns and protect you from future threats. In this video, we're breaking down why your 3 a.m. brain isn't broken. It's just a pattern recognition machine that never learned to feel safe in silence. It's 3 a.m., you're exhausted. Your body is begging for sleep. But your brain is hosting a full-scale corporate meeting, complete with PowerPoint presentations of every conversation you've had in the last decade. You're replaying that thing you said in 7th grade. You're rehearsing arguments for conflicts that haven't even happened yet. You're running simulations of alternate timelines where you said the perfect comeback instead of just nodding awkwardly. And the worst part? You can't fire the attendees. They're all you. Here's what nobody tells you. This isn't insomnia. This isn't even anxiety, at least not in the way you think. What you're experiencing is your default mode network, the part of your brain responsible for self-reflection, memory consolidation, and existential pondering, throwing a rave the second external stimulation drops to zero. While most people's brains idle at a reasonable volume, yours is operating like a 24-hour news network that never learned how to go off air. Neuroscience has a name for what you're doing: rumination. But here's the kicker. Rumination isn't inherently pathological. It's your brain's desperate attempt to close what psychologists call a prediction error. Your mind is a pattern recognition machine that evolved to keep you alive by learning from the past and predicting them. Future. When something doesn't match your internal simulation, when reality diverges from what you expected or needed, your brain treats it like an unsolved puzzle. And puzzles, for certain types of nervous systems, are impossible to ignore. Approximately 20% of the population has what's called sensory processing sensitivity. This means your nervous system doesn't just record life. It records life in 8K IMAX with surround sound and director's commentary. Every micro expression, every tonal shift, every ambient detail gets logged. And all that data, it needs processing time. For you, nighttime isn't rest. It's your brain's scheduled maintenance window, the only time it can finally run the defragmentation program without interruption. But here's what makes this even more complex. Not all nighttime thinking is created equal. There's a massive difference between rumination that haunts you and rumination that serves you. In this video, we're breaking down the 4 types of nighttime brain activity, why your mind refuses to shut down, and how to transform your 3 a.m. neural symphony from a curse into a strategic advantage. Because what if I told you that your overactive brain isn't a bug? It's a feature that most people don't have the hardware to run. Let's talk about why your brain is doing this in the first place. Because here's the thing most people don't understand. Your brain isn't torturing you for fun. It's trying to save your life using a system that was calibrated for a world that no longer exists. Dr. Susan Whitburn, a cognitive psychologist, describes the human brain as a prediction machine. Every single moment of your waking life, your prefrontal cortex is running thousands of microsimulations, predicting what's about to happen next based on past experiences. When you walk into a room, your brain predicts where the furniture is. When someone starts a sentence, your brain predicts how they'll finish it. When you send a text, your brain predicts the response you'll get. This predictive processing is what allows you to navigate reality without getting overwhelmed by every single stimulus. But here's where it gets interesting. When reality doesn't match the prediction, when someone responds in a way you didn't expect, when a conversation goes sideways, when you realize hours later that you misread a social cue, your brain experiences what's called a prediction error. And for most people, small prediction errors get filed away and forgotten. But for you, for the 20% with heightened sensory processing, that prediction error becomes a glowing red alert that your nervous system cannot ignore. Picture this. You're at work. You say something you think is helpful. Your colleague responds with a tight smile and a clipped "thanks" before turning away. Most people would shrug it off. But your brain just detected a mismatch. You predicted warmth and got coldness. You predicted validation and got dismissal. And now, 6 hours later, when you're finally alone in the dark, your default mode network boots up like a crime scene investigator, replaying that interaction frame by frame, analyzing every variable, trying to reverse engineer exactly where the prediction failed. This is why you can't let things go. It's not weakness. It's not overthinking for the sake of overthinking. Your brain is attempting to update its predictive model so the error doesn't happen again. You're essentially running a self-improvement algorithm, except instead of happening consciously during the day, it happens automatically at night when your executive function finally stops blocking access to your emotional archives. But here's the brutal truth about this process. Replaying a memory isn't like watching a video recording. Memory is reconstructive, not reproductive. Every time you recall that conversation, you're not accessing the original file, you're accessing the last time you remembered it, which has been edited and annotated by your current emotional state. If you're anxious now, the memory gets re-encoded with anxiety. If you're insecure now, the memory gets polluted with insecurity. You're not reviewing what actually happened. You're reviewing a cover song that gets progressively more distorted with each playback. This is where rumination becomes a trap. Unlike reflection, which has a beginning, middle, and end, rumination is a loop. You extract a lesson, I should have said X instead of Y. You feel temporary relief, and then you forget the lesson and replay the event again, convinced that this time you'll find the missing piece, but you won't, because the missing piece isn't in the memory. It's in your nervous system's inability to accept that some things can't be perfectly understood or controlled. And if you grew up in an environment where you had to predict adult moods to stay safe, where reading the room wasn't a social skill but a survival mechanism, your prediction machine never learned to turn off. Dr. Lisa M. Hooper's research on parentified children shows that when kids are forced to become emotional caretakers for unstable adults, their nervous systems get wired to operate in permanent crisis mode. Rest starts to feel dangerous because historically, letting your guard down meant missing a critical warning sign. So even decades later, even in total safety, your brain keeps scanning, keeps processing, keeps running scenarios, because the alarm system that kept you alive as a child never got the memo that the threat is over. This is why sleep doesn't fix your exhaustion. You're not just physically tired. You're experiencing what researchers call bone-deep tiredness, the kind that comes from a nervous system that never learned how to feel safe enough to fully rest. Your body might be horizontal, but your brain is still standing guard at the watchtower, convinced that if it stops monitoring, something catastrophic will slip through the cracks. Now that you understand why your brain won't shut up, let's break down the how. Because not everyone's 3 a.m. brain operates the same way. There are 4 distinct types of nighttime thinkers, each with their own neural signature, and understanding which one you are is the first step toward working with your brain instead of against it. You're lying in bed, and suddenly you're back in that meeting from 3 weeks ago. Then you're at a birthday party from 2014. Then you're remembering a conversation with your mom from last Tuesday, and somehow all 3 memories are playing simultaneously like a split-screen nightmare. You're not just thinking, you're conducting a full forensic review of your entire social history, cross-referencing events, looking for patterns, trying to build a unified theory of why people react to you the way they do. This is the archivist brain. Your hippocampus, the brain's memory center, is in overdrive, pulling files from deep storage and spreading them across your mental workspace like a detective's murder board. The reason this happens at night is actually fascinating. During the day, your prefrontal cortex acts as a gatekeeper, filtering which memories get attention. But when you lie down and external stimulation drops, that gatekeeper clocks out, and suddenly your hippocampus has unrestricted access to the archives. Here's what makes archivists different. You're not just remembering random events. You're looking for continuity. Your brain is trying to construct a coherent narrative of who you are across time. The problem? Human behavior is inherently contradictory. You were confident on Tuesday and anxious on Wednesday. You were generous last month and selfish last week. And your archivist brain hates that inconsistency. So it keeps replaying, keeps analyzing, trying to reconcile the data into a stable self-concept that makes sense. The shadow side of the archivist? You start believing that if you just review enough memories, you'll finally figure out the real you. But the real you isn't hiding in the past. It's being constructed right now, in this moment, every time you choose how to respond to your own thoughts. Something went wrong today. Maybe someone was short with you. Maybe a project didn't go as planned. Maybe you just felt off and you can't pinpoint why. And now, at 2 a.m., you're conducting a full investigation. You're reviewing every detail, every interaction, every possible contributing factor. You're building timelines. You're considering alternative explanations. You're not satisfied with surface-level answers. You need to understand the mechanism. This is the investigator brain, and it's driven by what psychologists call intolerance of uncertainty. Your anterior cingulate cortex, the part of your brain responsible for error detection, is lighting up like a Christmas tree because something in your internal model of reality doesn't compute. And unlike most people who can shrug and say, sometimes things just happen, you can't let it go. Your brain treats unsolved problems like open wounds. Here's what makes investigators special. You have an almost pathological need for causality. You don't just want to know what happened. You want to know why it happened, how it happened, and what it means about you, about others, about the fundamental nature of reality itself. This is actually a marker of high analytical intelligence. You're essentially doing scientific inquiry on your own life. But the investigator's curse is this. Human behavior doesn't always have clean causality. Sometimes people are rude because they're tired. Sometimes things fail because of random chance. Sometimes there is no deeper meaning, but your brain can't accept that. So it keeps digging, keeps analyzing, manufacturing patterns in noise, connecting dots that don't actually form a picture. You're not replaying the past or rehearsing the future. You're monitoring. Your brain is checking doors, reviewing tomorrow's schedule, running threat assessments, making sure nothing catastrophic is about to happen. You're listening to every sound in the house. You're mentally reviewing your bank account, your health, your relationships, looking for cracks. You're not anxious about any one specific thing. You're just maintaining a state of readiness. This is the Sentinel brain, and it's a direct inheritance from childhood hypervigilance. If you grew up in an environment where safety was conditional, where adult moods were unpredictable, where you had to be the responsible one, where crisis could erupt at any moment, your amygdala, the brain's alarm center, got stuck in the on position. Your nervous system learned that vigilance equals survival. And now, even in objective safety, your brain believes that if it stops scanning, something terrible will happen. Research on post-traumatic growth shows that people who survive significant childhood adversity often develop what looks like a superpower, the ability to detect micro-threats that others miss. You notice when someone's tone shifts slightly. You pick up on forced smiles. You sense tension in a room before anyone says a word. This is your nervous system operating as an early warning radar, which was adaptive when you were young and vulnerable. But the Sentinel's trap is that you can't turn it off. Rest feels like negligence. Relaxation feels like lowering your defenses. And so you stay awake, on guard, scanning for threats that statistically aren't coming, burning through your energy reserves like a phone that never stops searching for a signal. Here's where everything you think you know about your 3 a.m. brain gets flipped on its head. Because for years, you've been told that rumination is pathological, that overthinking is a disorder, that your inability to just relax is a character flaw that needs to be fixed with meditation apps and sleep hygiene and positive affirmations. But what if I told you that your nighttime brain isn't malfunctioning? It's actually performing a high-level cognitive process that most people's brains simply aren't equipped to handle. Let's talk about the default mode network. This is the neural system that activates when you're not focused on external tasks, when you're daydreaming, reflecting, or lying awake at night. For decades, neuroscientists dismissed the DMN as brain noise, the mental equivalent of a screensaver. But recent research reveals something extraordinary. The default mode network is where creativity happens. It's where insight emerges. It's where your brain connects disparate pieces of information that your conscious mind would never think to link together. Einstein didn't have his breakthrough about relativity while actively problem solving. He had it while daydreaming about riding a beam of light. Tesla's most revolutionary inventions came to him in moments of mental wandering, not focused calculation. Your nighttime brain, the one that won't shut up, is doing the same thing. It's running what neuroscientists call spontaneous cognition, allowing your neural networks to make connections that rigid, task-focused thinking would miss. But here's the critical distinction. There's a difference between intrusive rumination and deliberate rumination. Intrusive rumination is passive. It's being haunted by thoughts you didn't invite and can't control. It's the mental equivalent of being stuck in a car with a driver who won't tell you where you're going. Deliberate rumination, on the other hand, is active. It's choosing to think deeply about something because you recognize there's value in the processing. The problem isn't that your brain is active at night. The problem is that you've lost agency over the process. You're not directing the thinking. The thinking is directing you. And that shift from I am thinking to thoughts are happening to me is what transforms a cognitive gift into a psychological burden. So how do you reclaim agency? Through a technique psychologists call self-distancing. This is where you shift from being the overwhelmed player to being the objective coach. Instead of thinking, why did I say that stupid thing? You think, why did yours say that? What was going on for them in that moment? This isn't dissociation, it's perspective taking. You're creating just enough emotional distance to analyze the situation without drowning in it. Research from the University of Michigan shows that people who practice self-distancing experience significantly less emotional reactivity and better problem-solving outcomes. They're able to extract lessons from difficult experiences without getting trapped in shame spirals. They can review past mistakes without their identity collapsing. Because when you talk to yourself in the third person, you activate the same neural networks you use when giving advice to a friend, which is almost always more compassionate and rational than the advice you give yourself. Here's the other piece most people miss. Your nighttime brain isn't trying to torture you. It's trying to protect you. Every simulation, every replay, every analysis, it's all in service of a nervous system that believes preparation equals survival. Your brain learned, probably very early, that if you could just predict the unpredictable, if you could just control the uncontrollable, you'd be safe. And even though you're not in danger anymore, even though the adults who are unstable are no longer in your life, even though you've built safety for yourself, your brain still operates on that old algorithm. This is what researchers call a conserved survival strategy. Your nervous system is like an antivirus program that detected a threat in 1997 and has been running a full system scan every night for 27 years, long after the virus was deleted. The threat assessment is outdated, but the program doesn't know how to update itself. But here's the empowering reframe. That overactive threat detection system is also why you're so perceptive. It's why you notice things others miss. It's why you can read a room in 30 seconds and know exactly who's faking it, who's hurting, who's dangerous. Harvard research on toxic stress shows that children who grew up in high vigilance environments develop what looks like emotional superpowers: heightened empathy, acute pattern recognition, and almost psychic ability to sense inauthenticity. The question isn't, how do I turn this off? The question is, how do I make this work for me instead of against me? Because the same neural circuitry that keeps you awake analyzing past conversations is the same circuitry that allows you to write, create, problem solve, and connect dots that others can't see. The default mode network isn't the enemy. It's a tool. And like any tool, it's only as useful as your ability to wield it with intention. So what does that look like practically? It means giving your brain a job instead of letting it freelance. It means setting aside 20 minutes before bed to do deliberate rumination, journaling, voice recording your thoughts, physically writing out the loops so your brain knows the processing has been completed. Because here's what most people don't realize. Your brain doesn't keep replaying things because it's obsessed. It keeps replaying things because it doesn't trust that the lesson has been logged. It's like having 17 browser tabs open because you're afraid if you close them, you'll lose the information. But once you externalize the thought, once you write it down, speak it out loud, or even just consciously acknowledge it, your brain can finally mark it as processed and move on. Let's bring this home. Because understanding why your brain won't shut up is powerful, but if you can't do anything with that knowledge, it's just trivia. So here's the protocol. The exact process for transforming your nighttime brain from a prison into a sanctuary. The first rule of managing a hyperactive nighttime brain is counterintuitive. Stop trying to shut it down. Because here's what happens when you lie in bed thinking, I shouldn't be thinking, I need to sleep, why can't I just turn off? You're adding a second layer of rumination about your rumination. You're now anxious about being anxious, which doubles the cortisol, which wakes you up even more, which makes you more frustrated, which releases more cortisol. It's a neurochemical doom loop. Instead, try this radical reframe. Your brain is active because it has work to do. And just like you wouldn't yell at your stomach for digesting food, you don't need to yell at your brain for processing information. The default mode network isn't activating randomly. It's activating because you fed it a full day of social interactions, decisions, stimuli, and unresolved emotional data. And now it needs time to sort through the filing cabinet. So when your brain boots up at 3 a.m., instead of panicking, try saying, okay, you clearly have something to process. Let's do this deliberately. Because the moment you shift from victim to participant, you've reclaimed agency. You're no longer being haunted by thoughts, you're collaborating with them. Here's the biological reality. Your brain will keep replaying a thought until it believes the information has been secured. This is called the Zeigarnik effect, the psychological principle that incomplete tasks occupy more mental space than completed ones. Your nighttime rumination isn't random. It's your brain's way of saying, we haven't finished processing this yet. So finish it. Keep a notebook next to your bed. Not your phone, because screens activate your sympathetic nervous system and tank your melatonin. And when a thought loop starts, write it down. Not a novel, just the core sentence. I'm worried I came across as dismissive in that meeting. I'm replaying what Sarah said, because I can't tell if she was mad. I'm running scenarios for tomorrow's presentation. The act of writing tricks your brain into believing the thought has been captured, which means it no longer needs to hold it in active memory. You're essentially giving your brain permission to close the tab because the information is saved elsewhere. And here's the magic. Most of the time, once you externalize the thought, you'll realize it's not nearly as complex or catastrophic as it felt when it was looping inside your head. Your brain isn't going to stop processing, but you can negotiate when it processes. This is a technique borrowed from cognitive behavioral therapy called worry scheduling. Instead of trying to suppress nighttime thoughts, you give them a designated appointment. When a thought loop starts at 3 a.m., you say, out loud if possible, because vocalizing activates different neural pathways than internal monologue. I hear you. This is important, but right now is not processing time. We're going to address this tomorrow at 10 a.m. Then you write the thought in your notebook as a contract with yourself that you will revisit it. What this does is brilliant. It separates the urgency from the importance. Your brain treats every thought at night as an emergency because your cortisol is elevated and your prefrontal cortex is offline. But when you assign it a specific future time, you're signaling to your nervous system that this isn't a crisis requiring immediate action. It's a task that has been scheduled and will be handled. And for most hyperactive brains, that sense of structure is enough to reduce the activation. Remember what we talked about earlier. Intrusive rumination is passive, deliberate rumination is active. So when you catch yourself spiraling, I'm such an idiot. Why did I say that? Everyone probably thinks I'm incompetent. You need to interrupt the first-person narrative and shift to third-person perspective. Instead of, why did I say that? Ask, why did your name say that? What was going on for them in that moment? Talk to yourself the way you'd talk to a friend who came to you with the same problem. You'd never say, yeah, you're an idiot, you should feel terrible. You'd say, you were nervous. You were trying to contribute. You didn't have all the information. It's not a character flaw, it's just a moment. This isn't toxic positivity. This is accurate assessment. Because when you're stuck in first-person rumination, you're not seeing reality. You're seeing reality filtered through anxiety, insecurity, and a nervous system that's biased toward threat detection. Self-distancing doesn't eliminate the problem. It eliminates the distortion. Here's the final piece, and it's the hardest one for people with hypervigilant nervous systems to accept. Rest is not laziness. Rest is not negligence. Rest is not you dropping the ball. Rest is a biological necessity that your body is screaming for, even if your brain is convinced that vigilance is still required. This doesn't happen overnight. It might take weeks or months of consistent practice before your body believes you. But every single time you choose rest over rumination, you're retraining a neural pathway. You're teaching your amygdala that the alarm doesn't need to stay on forever. If you've made it this far, you're probably one of the 20% whose brain doesn't come with a convenient off switch. And I need you to hear this. That's not a defect. That's a feature. Your nighttime brain, the one that replays conversations, runs simulations, investigates causality, scans for threats, is the same brain that allows you to see patterns others miss, to create solutions others can't imagine, to connect with depth that most people will never access. The difference between suffering and thriving isn't about eliminating the activation. It's about understanding the mechanism and working with it instead of against it. Your brain isn't broken. It's just operating at a frequency most people's hardware can't support. And once you stop pathologizing it and start leveraging it, once you shift from why won't this stop to how can I make this useful, everything changes. So tonight, when your brain boots up at 3 a.m., you have a choice. You can fight it, shame it, exhaust yourself trying to force it into submission. Or you can say, okay, let's process this deliberately. Let's externalize the loop. Let's become the coach instead of the overwhelmed player. Let's turn this activation into insight. Because your 3 a.m. brain isn't the enemy. It's just a pattern recognition machine doing exactly what it was designed to do. And the moment you stop resisting it and start directing it, you transform from someone who can't sleep into someone who knows how to think at a level most people never reach. Now here's my question for you. Are you an archivist, a simulator, an investigator, or a sentinel? Drop your type in the comments below. Let's see how many other pattern recognition machines are out here running advanced software on a world that keeps telling us we're glitching. Because you're not glitching. You're just operating at a level of complexity that the average system can't process. And if this video helped you reframe your nighttime brain, hit that like button so I know to make more content for the 20% who think in 8K IMAX while everyone else is still buffering in 480p. If you'd like, share your experiences with